when I arrived in Warrnambool, the thing that I noticed first was that absolutely no one in the art department read at all. Tony Peel, for instance, was doing this sort of pop art using twisty packets and so on, and so it was a lot. It was actually a lot of comic book stuff. There was a program on at an Australian television series called Auntie Jack, and it was that style. It was actually that style of literature that I found that people were actually interested in. I was astonished because I had gone to art school when I was still in California, and people were incredibly literate. You know, they actually read. They were obsessed with reading, and suddenly I found myself really in a bit of a desert. And so the very first thing I did is I became a poetry guerrilla, and I started putting poems up on a notice board. It was just outside the print room. So I started just putting poems up. Some of them were mine, some of them were people who I really liked, and not long after that, after my arrival, of course I started to meet a lot of interesting people. Ruth Johnson was there, Willie Howe, Trevor Abrahams, Neil Emerson, Claire Valance. There were some really incredibly talented people. I was very fortunate that I'd come in on one of those times where there were a lot of talented people at the time. One of the first things I did after really making the acquaintance of these people and working with them, because I was there every day and you get to know people, is I think it was really through the poetry. I was, like I said, I was putting poetry up on walls. I was talking about poetry. It was clear that I actually was a poet. And my house up in the country, just outside of Cobden, was Cumberley, which was actually the name of the property. It was also the name of the poetry magazine that we were, in fact, producing. And that was with Billy Marshall Stone King and Patrick Macaulay, the two other poets. And we'd been producing that for some time. And that was really the vehicle for the poetry readings that we began putting on at Warrnambool. And what we did is we'd hire the cafeteria, and we'd go to the council and get potted plants and so on, and candles and flagons. This was the day before cask wine. And we'd put on these fantastic evenings. And because we always were interested in music, we had a musical component always. People like Neil Murray, who ended up becoming involved with the Warrnambool band. He was an associate of ours through poetry, but he was also a musician. So we always had music, and we'd put on the poetry readings. One of the most interesting readings that we put on, in fact, was in the winter. One winter, I think it was in 1976, and Patrick Macaulay's brother, Jimmy, brought down a busload of poets from Melbourne. And these poets were the hotshots of Melbourne at the time, and amongst them were two poets who were really probably the hottest guns in Melbourne, which was Eric Beach and Pio. And they were both performance poets, both excellent poets and very good performers.
All right, Paty, you've got a book there. You say it's the first little poetry book.
This was the very first book of Cumberley that we actually. Well, actually, it's not the first one we published. It's actually the fourth, but it was the first one that was produced in colour. This was, in fact, produced in Denpasar, Bali.